Captain Huggy Face, show us what chipper means. That's right!
Well, we talked about visual art last time, may as well talk about audio art now. Music and sound design. I admittedly have very little knowledge about how music works. I couldn't tell you the difference between a chord and a time signature, but I can at least recognize when a song is nice to listen to, and more importantly, when it fits the mood of the scene. And I'd say WordGirl is pretty good at this. A lot of the incidental music works well and is pretty memorable to me, like this more low-key track used for scenes of flying or searching.
Meanwhile, flying around the city...
Well, I was hoping to have the butcher wrapped up.
The standard action theme.
Hey, big guy! Looky here! Whoa, what's going on over here?
And this really good tension theme.
That's right.
Arguably the more memorable bits, though, are the character-specific themes. There's a lot of examples, but some of my favorites are Dr. Two Brains' organ theme for a classic mad scientist feel.
Meanwhile, in the lair of Dr. Two Brains...
Tobey getting something sinister yet quirky.
You think you're so perfect, don't you? Always trying to show me up with your excellent grasp of vocabulary.
Mr. Big with a more grandiose feel to reflect his wealth and ambition.
Meanwhile, across town in Mr. Big's penthouse lair...
The cheery Botsford theme.
Congratulations, Becky. I am so proud that you got elected class president.
And of course, the good old definitions theme.
Having or showing great excitement and interest, like how excited you were about winning that stuffed dough.
And finally, there's the exciting theme tune that perfectly matches the tone and pace of the opening.
She'll make sure that crime will pay and throw some mighty words your way.
While the soundtrack wasn't the most unique or distinct thing in the world, it still gets across the feel it's going for well. This is one of those cases where if you took out the soundtrack, the show would definitely feel more dull, which I think shows it did its job well. As for the sound design, it's there. Pretty much everything sounds how you'd expect, and things that aren't replicable in real life get sounds that feel appropriate. The metallic stomps of Tobey's robots, the eerie hum of Mr. Big's mind control devices, all the various high-tech rays we see. Special shout out to WordGirl's super speed sound effect. They could have just used a sonic boom or wind sound, but the flash of light is pretty unique and matches the visual design of WordGirl's speed. I've always liked the light trail effect, but never really consciously, I guess, until now. Overall, I think the sound is about on par with the art style. Not the most standout, but still good. Although we're not actually done talking about music, because our first episode of the video is...
What happened to the rest of your barbershop quartet?
Just another ordinary, extraordinary day in the city.
Uh-oh, I was not prepared to look at those family trees this early. The city is coming up on its 100th anniversary, and the best way to celebrate this is apparently to hold a barbershop quartet competition.
The most melodious and exciting singing style there is.
Yeah, that's why I've never seen barbershop quartets anywhere outside of this episode. Two Brains' henchmen are excited to enter, but Two Brains gives a hard no, until he hears the winners will get to see a perfectly preserved century-old cheese wheel. I'd say he has a one-track mind, but wouldn't it technically be two tracks? As Two Brains decides to enter his second brain as the fourth member of their quartet, the Botsfords hear about the competition and are just as excited. And yes, of course they already have the right outfits. Back at the lair, while the henchmen are practicing their song, Two Brains builds a ray that can make anyone's singing voice sound terrible. An extremely dramatic sequence ensues while Red Hat agonizes over ruining Two Brains' shockingly beautiful singing voice. Back at the Botsfords, we learn that Becky still struggles with performing arts, so she's named manager instead. True story, I was typing in my notes about how Bob was obviously going to take her place and it happened before I finished the sentence. We skip ahead to the competition, where the mayor is giving a very awkward speech.
Look, a dog from the old days. That dog must be, dead now.
Oh, but you're wrong, Mayor. That dog isn't dead. He's right behind you. Two Brains uses his ray on the Botsfords during their performance, but gets called up by Bob and quickly caught by WordGirl. He and his team are disqualified, but the henchmen want to sing anyway, and their quartet/trio puts on a really good performance.
Too bad you cheated, or you probably would have won.
Do you get the moral yet? The Botsfords win, and the Two Brains quartet gets to put on new performances in jail. I love how hilariously specific they were in making this a barbershop quartet contest specifically. It sounds on more than just a generic battle of the bands or something, and actually fits with the idea of this being the town centennial. While we don't know when the show takes place, we learn here that the city dates back to at least 1901. If we assume it was founded shortly beforehand, that would fit with when barbershop music was popular.
All the guys from my barbershop quartet are dead, so no, not really.
You could say it's a city heritage thing. The two major performances we get are pretty good too. Took a while to decide whether I preferred the Botsford Four or the Two Brains Quartet, but now I'd say the latter deserve the hypothetical win.
I think I might stay and chat.
Outside of that, this episode does better with the humor than the story. While the anti-cheating moral is fine enough, the plot is pretty predictable and not that interesting. The climax in particular is very fast and kinda dull. It does make up for it though, with pretty amusing moments. The highlight would probably be Two Brains singing through his argument with Red Hat, but the humor is pretty consistent throughout.
Nothing. No. Nothing. Okay.
I think the biggest sign of this episode's priorities is Becky's lack of music skills. It feels like it could set up a subplot about her getting excluded and feeling bad about it, but over the course of one scene it diverts to her being a manager dressed as a cowboy for some reason, and she doesn't complain. Adding a subplot this late in the episode would have been an issue in itself, but preventing it from taking up time in general allowed more time for moments like this.
Oh, I hadn't noticed it. Cheese isn't really my thing.
Really?
I admit this episode feels a little flat in a way due to the underwhelming story. The jokes don't totally make up for it, but it's still a pretty entertaining episode. Watch it for the songs at least. I wish we had longer versions of them.
Oh, my poor ears. Stop that at once.
Not their fault you can't appreciate the second coming of Scatman John.
For the last time, we did not order a giant trampoline. You know, pal, you could have told me that before I set it up.
Mr. Big's newest mission is to obtain himself a trampoline, specifically a Mega Boing trampoline, the greatest in the world. Leslie informs him that there's only one Mega Boing in existence, and it's specifically meant as a grand prize for a granola bar sale by the Fair City Scouts. Okay, odd name for a group that we later learn spans the country. This confused me even as a kid. The next day, Becky is heading off to her first meeting with Violet and Scoops' scout troop, gender inclusive before it was cool, which is led by Mrs. Ripley. Bob also joins, and I'm starting to think there's some weird technicality that means he's legally considered a human. Mrs. Ripley talks about the granola bar sale and the prize, which the troop is unhappy to hear about since they've never been able to sell a lot, but then, of course, Mr. Big shows up to give some tips on salesmanship. Becky doesn't trust Mr. Big.
Becky! That accusatory tone is no way for a baby bear to speak to a special troop leader!
She's literally right. But Mr. Big claims he's just trying to give back after his previous illegal activities. And to his credit, his tactics aren't illegal and actually work well, as shown by Violet using her art and Scoops advertising to a crowd.
Some of you may be hesitant to try the fern, but trust me, it's a flavor not to be missed.
Actual conversation among the Power Rangers Cosmic Fury production crew. Becky's troop manages to win the trampoline, and Mrs. Ripley hugs Mr. Big before bashfully walking off. I'm starting to think she has a crush on him, and that's why she leapt to his defense earlier. At the trampoline's unveiling, though, it goes missing, and Becky knows exactly what happened. WordGirl finds Mr. Big bouncing on the trampoline, on top of his massive skyscraper. Good thing she's not in a bad mood, otherwise she might bump him off in more ways than one. WordGirl and Mr. Big have an argument while bouncing, with some amusing fades as they go on and off screen. Huggy and Leslie start fighting on the trampoline as well, but soon the pairs get mixed up, and no one knows what's going on.
WordGirl!
Dad? I mean, Drat.
The heroes take advantage of the confusion to apprehend the villains and retrieve the trampoline, and as the scouts enjoy bouncing in front of City Hall for some reason, Mr. Big and Leslie are assigned some community service, in the form of picking up granola bar wrappers.
Hey, you two. I'm going to go play on a trampoline.
Not sure if I have more or less questions about the narrator's physiology now. Another rare example here of Mr. Big foregoing mind control, and I like the approach taken with him here. As I mentioned, he doesn't actually do anything illegal or even really immoral, nor does he urge the scouts to do such things. He simply gives pretty basic sales advice like appeal to emotions, upsell, and be confident and focused. Honestly, if Mr. Big's motivations weren't revealed until later, they could probably get a pretty decent mystery out of questioning whether he's sincere or not. This then leads to the aforementioned amusing bits of selling, then the over-the-top reactions to the trampoline's disappearance, and finally the comedy climax on Mr. Big's roof. This feels a lot like the previous episode, but with even better humor and without any moments that feel anticlimactic or rushed. The ending fight isn't much, but the whole bouncing scene is funny enough that I don't care. And the whole concept of a big, dangerous businessman hijacking a kid's snack sale to get a trampoline helps it feel more self-aware about the goofiness. The one weird moment is when Mr. Big catches on to the similarities between Becky and WordGirl briefly. This isn't an uncommon thing on the show, but Mr. Big's tone and the music that plays add a bit too much gravitas for a joke that gets immediately dropped. It feels like a moment from an episode about Mr. Big gunning for WordGirl's identity. But the episode is overall pretty pretty fun, especially if you've been a scout of some sort or even just done a school fundraiser or something. Also, special mention to Becky and Bob's sashes being empty at first but getting badges later on. Nice touch.
Oh, tempting.
Give it to me, it's mine.
Oh no, Violet's been infected by Eileen. Can someone get a giant sleeping bag?
But enough about emotional crises or demonic creatures intent on taking over the world. Let's talk about romance!
Lady Redundant Woman and the Butcher end up targeting the same ancient artifact at the same time. LDR summons a duplicate, but said dupe and Butcher fall in love at first sight. Or second sight, I guess, for Butcher. LDR escapes with the duplicate, Butcher helplessly calling for her as an uncomfortable WordGirl is restrained. The scenario later repeats itself at the jewelry store, where Butcher names the duplicate Doopy, and Lady Redundant Woman finally realizes what's going on. LDR takes Doopy away again, as WordGirl worries that the kids watching won't like the romance story. Is that an actual fourth wall break or something I made up? You figure it out. LDR, upset at Doopy's poor taste in men, brutally purges her from existence before hearing about another rare artifact, a trio of ancient chicken bones from a literal museum of garbage.
Our mayor will let just about anyone build a museum.
WordGirl prepares to intercept the home robbery, but gets briefly sidetracked by Scoop's calling.
Eat if you want, I mean, you don't have to.
Alright.
Call me back at exactly 5:15.
WordGirl, you're starting to edge the line between romantic and creepy. I think there was a How I Met Your Mother episode about this. Butcher is only interested in seeing Doopy again, and LDR is forced to comply when she's surrounded. Butcher traps LDR and the superhero so he can get some alone time with Doopy, despite them still being 5 feet away and able to see and talk, but Doopy suddenly makes a tearful confession.
I'm a vegetarian.
Oh, wait. What's a vegetarian again? I know we've covered this.
Yeah, multiple times.
Ah, the joy of meaningless continuity. Butcher is too depressed to fight, Lady Redundant Woman is just sick of everything, and WordGirl talks to Scoops from inside a cage of pepperoni. This is one of those episodes I was specifically looking forward to rewatching, and it did not disappoint. What can I even say about the premise? Two villains falling in love is hilarious enough, but the crown jewel is Butcher's paramour being a duplicate of a woman he doesn't care for, with said woman acting like an angry, controlling mother. The romantic montages are a bit repetitive, but the constant escalation of them helps a lot. The sound system gag is in a similar boat. I love the final reveal that it was sold off to another guy. Speaking of those montages, they contribute to this being one of the best looking episodes thus far. They add more variety to an episode that already had a lot of set pieces, and it has some decent visual gags, especially the last one. On top of that is the animation of Pepperoni Prison, and all of WordGirl while talking to Scoops. This crush is one of the best things in the series, honestly. One facet I find interesting is the decision to have Doopy not really talk at all until her confession of vegetarianism. I can't decide if I want to be disappointed they limited her personality like this, or impressed at the potentially deliberate progression of her becoming a separate person over time as expressed by her not speaking for herself until later on. Something I really love is when a story is able to be both a goofy concept and genuinely interesting at the same time, and this episode fits that description. Very possibly the highlight of season 2 thus far, to be blunt.
And we learned that romance and superheroes really don't mix.
Tell that to every superhero movie ever. And every fanfic writer.
Mini golf? Who takes a first date to mini golf? I'm coming over!
While WordGirl and Huggy play table tennis, the villains have gathered for another convention where a newcomer is introduced. Guy Rich. Yeah. And he plays golf. Mr. Big, jealous over the new guy butting in on his niche and one-upping him, brags about his colossal mini golf course that doesn't actually exist. His plan to cover his tracks? Mind control the other villains into stealing things to build it. While this goes on, WordGirl goes to give her own sort of greeting to Guy Rich.
What do you say we swing by, welcome him to town, and let him know who's boss?
But quickly learns he's just an ordinary man who lied about his villainous exploits to impress people. Guy mentions the mini golf course Big bragged about, and WordGirl gets suspicious. WordGirl flies in to get all the stolen property returned, but, Mr. Big still has all the other villains under his control? Yeah, it's the mini golf episode that features a colossal villain army. WordGirl gets bodied, but Huggy succeeds in stealing the mind control device and freeing the villains. WordGirl has Guy Rich come out to reveal the truth about himself. The other villains mind control Mr. Big as payback and call WordGirl a buzzkill for stopping them. I mean, you guys could all just bum rush her again and stay the course. the mini golf course. I really wanted this episode to be funny, and it kind of is, but there's way too many moments that just fall too flat for me. The large cast of villains is neat, but they don't really do much. Most of their relevance comes from them being mind-controlled, which inherently limits their personalities. There's few jokes stemming from these specific characters being around, and the big fight at the end feels hollow despite being a fun surface-level spectacle. Mr. Big's plot is okay. He puts on a fun show, and it's a little interesting to see this more insecure side, but his jealousy thing isn't very original or engaging. Guy Ritchie is probably the highlight, but his implementation feels a bit messy. He's just a guy who fakes being a villain because he wants to stand out, I think. He talks about how the world is caught up in competition over who has the best stuff, and how Mr. Big is apparently looked up to, but I'm not 100% sure why he and his brother, yeah, his caddy is actually his brother, go to all this trouble, why they want to win that competition. That said, he's actually rather charming in his sincerity when he drops his persona, and the episode does a good job making you feel bad for him, even if his motives are a little muddled.
I know, but tell that to the rest of the world.
I think this concept would have worked a lot better if you dropped the Mr. Big angle and leaned more into someone faking being a villain. Imagine WordGirl investigating the villain and discovering all the crimes he committed were actually staged. You'd have more time to explore why specifically he feels this way too. Or alternatively, just spend more time with the mini golf course and make it way more over the top. Maybe WordGirl gets forced to play a game and is legally obligated to never arrest Big again if she loses or something. This episode is overall a bit of a mess and isn't as entertaining as it could have been, but it has just enough funny moments that it doesn't feel like a slog. I'd probably rather watch Big's Big Bounce again though. At least I can appreciate Mr. Big's good taste in sports. Mini golf will always be better than regular golf. I'm not gonna ride around some boring artificial grasslands when I could be hitting a golf ball into a dragon's mouth or something.
But! As the dream world held promises of its hidden ability, Contrary, which would reverse any stat changes upon it.
Tim wins a competition to become mayor for a day, an arrangement I don't see going wrong in the slightest. The regular mayor asks him to keep things running as normal, grant any reasonable requests that come in, and not break anything. Meanwhile though, an extremely buff Viking arrives on the beach. He calls himself Nocan from the land of Contrarian.
I'm Violet from the city, which makes me, I guess, Violet from the city!
I'm starting to think naming a character Violet just magically makes them the best in the cast. Nocan makes known his affinity for contradictions and declares he will conquer the city, marching off towards City Hall. At City Hall, Tim is handling the job of mayor pretty well, thanks to Becky serving as an assistant, but gets quickly deposed by Nocan. The big guy starts fulfilling the opposite of the people's request before WordGirl shows up. Unable to beat Nocan's magic sword, WordGirl decides to surrender under the logic that this will cause Nocan to contrarily declare her the winner.
I have defeated the angry pixie warrior and her lemur friend!
I mean, for all we know, Lexiconians could grow pixie wings during puberty or something.
I'm Pixie of the Fairy Clan.
WordGirl then has the citizens go to Nocan and make the same request as before, but reverse so Nocan will fulfill their actual desires. This works, and WordGirl eventually gets him to leave by asking him to stay forever. Tim and the mayor return, and WordGirl uses her super speed to repair all the damage to the mayor's office. So I guess the city just saved a bunch of tax dollars on repairs. Neat. Have I mentioned yet that I have a soft spot for villains or other characters who feed into the show's vocabulary focus? Nocan the Contrarian is a villain who I've never regarded as that memorable, and I get the impression the general fanbase feels the same, but
No stop signs anymore anywhere in my kingdom!
He's just amazing. He's more boisterous than even the Whammer, which goes a long way to stop his admittedly repetitive shtick of contradicting things from getting stale, and this being exploited to defeat him at the end is pretty predictable, but pretty entertaining. The one blind spot is that his actual powers are pretty generic, just a magic sword that can create shields and vibrate things. I'd have thought he could magically turn things opposite, like turning a sturdy wall into something flimsy as paper. The framing device of Tim getting to be mayor for a day is okay. I don't think adding a time crunch of needing to fix things before the regular mayor gets back really adds anything, and it is a bit disappointing that Tim is pulled from the story after Nocan shows up. What we see of him in that position though is pretty funny, and acts as setup for the citizen requests that are brought up twice more with Nocan. I also think it would have been neat to involve Sally more. She works in City Hall and even gets a cameo here. This is one of those episodes that's so funny, it makes you forget about its storytelling issues. Nocan is really fun on his own, and honestly genius with this show specifically.
Speed! No, Buzz. I am your father.
Out of all the competitions we've been in lately, and let's face it, there've been a lot.
I'm starting to wonder if Tim is addicted to competing. Becky, find me a little kid to beat at wrestling! Becky and Tim's planning for a birdhouse construction contest are interrupted when the butcher robs the bank, only to be interrupted himself by his father, Kid Potato. Kid Potato criticizes Butcher's attire, lack of contact, and friendliness with his superhero nemesis before the two escape together. Later, Kid Potato declares he's shown up to fulfill his dream of forming a criminal duo with his son. Butcher goes along despite his discomfort with everything his dad is doing. Becky ditches her dad again to fight the newly christened Meat and Potatoes, but Butcher finally has enough of his dad's behavior and stands up to him. WordGirl tricks Butcher and Kid Potato into hitting each other, and Kid Potato admits he's proud of Butcher and just wants to see him more. Right off the bat, this episode reminds me a lot of...
Hold on! What about the whole birdhouse story?
They finished the birdhouse. But speaking of which, that subplot is the first major example of how this feels like a lesser version of Chuck's brother. That episode showed us two plot lines about familiar relationships that paralleled each other and came to similar conclusions. Here though, there isn't any real conflict between Becky and Tim. Tim stresses about being left alone to the birdhouse, but never gets upset with Becky, and it ends with her thanking Tim for being supportive. It came off more like the episode was just using Tim as a good parent to contrast Kid Potato's bad parent. It's not even all that entertaining, just consisting of more bad Becky excuses and an absurd amount of birds showing up. But oh yes, then we have the main plot. The premise is really good, but I think they chose the wrong angle to go at it with. The ultimate conclusion here is supposed to be that Kid Potato is well-meaning, but doesn't know how to express his feelings. It's trying to give a lesson about finding a balance between respecting your parents and standing up to yourself. A decent lesson for kids in theory, but I think it leans too hard on him being judgy and controlling to the point where it starts to feel uncomfortable. I think there's 3 potential better directions this episode could have taken. 1. Downplay Kid Potato being manipulative and go for a more comedic angle. 2. Flat out make Kid Potato more sympathetic and heighten Butcher's bad behavior to focus more on the parents are people too idea. 3. Lean into Butcher needing to stand up for himself without this rushed and forced reconciliation. The episode isn't flat out saying this behavior is okay, but it does feel like it's trying to divert some of the blame from Kid Potato because of his apparently good intentions despite pressuring Butcher into taking on a role he does not want at all. The best part of the episode was Kid Potato's dream sequence, which was a fun exploration of his mindset, even if it's just recounting what we already knew. There's some fun animation here, especially the comically evil-looking WordGirl and Huggy. On some level, I respect this episode for trying to go for another more serious theme and prominent moral, but their efforts to make the main antagonist gray went a bit too far with the flaws. In a vacuum, the message is good, but they shouldn't have shrugged off Kid Potato's actions as easily as they did, and it sours the episode a bit.
Oh, man! With a pointed head, looking at the sun through his fingers!
No, Becky, clearly Bob was trying to say a romanticorn.
I'm gonna take your cane.
Halloween has come, and Becky's class is having a costume contest. Becky is gobsmacked by Violet's WordGirl costume, and she isn't the only one.
What she uses...
Tobey somehow thinks Violet is WordGirl. When people say they don't see race in this universe, do they mean that literally? Later, Violet ends up winning the costume contest, and Tobey decides to ruin Halloween out of spite. To that end, he sends out some robots to steal all the candy in the city. Violet decides to go and stop him after some more kids with bad vision ask for her help. She takes Bob as her sidekick, but Becky goes into her own costume after Violet leaves.
Word up!
Violet's gonna be furious when she learns her cat knew Becky was WordGirl before her. Violet confronts Tobey.
What, do you take me for a fool?
Yes, and a silly goose.
See, this is the sort of thing I want to see when I talk about wanting these two to interact more. Okay, fine, I ship them a little bit. The real WordGirl defeats the robots and distributes the candy among all the kids in the neighborhood. Let's figure there's a reason her costume was red. Let's begin with the beginning on this one. Novel concept, I know. I think the costume contest was a bit of an overly elaborate way to set up the conflict. I don't think there was much reason to go this direction when it could have been extremely easy to just go with Tobey is greedy and wants candy. Him being angry that gluing a horseshoe to his head didn't net him a win doesn't connect that cleanly to stealing candy from everyone in the city. I think I would have preferred more time trick-or-treating, showing off more houses and costumes, but when we do get to that point, it's still really enjoyable. We get some cameos from Chuck, Von Housinghouse, and Reginald, and it's amusing to see what they give, or don't give, to trick-or-treaters. The various costumes, well, they're not much, save for the main characters and Eugene as a Tobey robot, but they add more visual variety than most episodes get. The creepy house scene, while underwhelming the second time around, is decent the first time, and I really like the design of the area. And speaking of that scene, this may be the most entertaining Tobey's robots have been. Them wearing giant costumes and being scared of the creepy house are amusing themselves, but I think this is also the most we've seen them talk thus far.
It's like stealing candy from a baby, ha ha ha.
No need to be so proud of yourself for that one, robot. But of course, then there's the crown jewel of the episode, Violet in a WordGirl costume. If you can look past the absurdity of people thinking she's real, and if not, why are you here? It's so fun to see her get into the role as the episode progresses. Suddenly I wish the framer stuck around. And as I've pointed out before, it's interesting to see Violet so easily take on the responsibility of saving the day. Like Violet Superhero, you could read it as her looking for glory, but I don't think that's accurate or fair in either case. She leaps into potential danger and never gets upset at WordGirl stealing her thunder or anything. As far as I can tell, this is the only explicitly Halloween-themed episode in the series, though I know there's at least one other episode with a Halloween vibe. And I'm glad to say this doesn't squander its potential. Even the intro I criticized was pretty funny at times.
Everyone's costume looks so good. Not as good as my costume, but...
Is that kid in the background rolling his eyes? This is honestly just everything I wanted from a Violet episode, a Tobey episode, and a Halloween episode.
Today's featured word is petrified. To give you a clue, here are some clips that show the meaning of the word.
I'm the one that you've looked for. Come to me and escape. Ah yes, the Mavzevum. Chuck's attempt to steal an ancient ice cream sandwich is interrupted by the Whammer stealing a golden hammer. Gotta say, I think it completes his look. When WordGirl arrives, she assumes the two are working together again. Whammer agrees, Chuck does not. In the ensuing fight, Chuck is defeated, but Whammer escapes. The Whammer retreats to his hideout, which turns out to be a rundown gym. I'm taking this as evidence of my Whammer used to be a pro wrestler theory, and decides to call Chuck at the police station. This interrupts a truly brutal interrogation by WordGirl. And further undercuts Chuck's insistence that the two are not working together. WordGirl and Huggy help the police transport Chuck to jail, across the desert? Whammer attacks, but it turns out their caravan was a decoy, and WordGirl lets slip a few too many details about the real transport. Whammer busts out Chuck, who reluctantly works with him to— yeah, he has hair! The two beat the superheroes, but Whammer's offer to train Chuck finally causes him to snap and attack. Whammer's counterattack frees WordGirl and Huggy, and the villains lose due to running out of condiments and whams, respectively. Oh boy, my favorite ending trope. I legitimately have no memory of this episode existing despite it being tied to the Halloween episode, which I do remember well. I honestly didn't think they'd bring back the Chuck-Whammer duo, and apparently this isn't even the last time. This could have easily been a rehash of Thorn and the Sidekick, what with Whammer joining up with Chuck and Chuck being annoyed about it, but the episode does a good job going for a different angle. The big one for me is the plotline of Chuck being captured. The interrogation scenes are pretty funny, and Whammer's efforts to bust Chuck out have a different feel than just regular robberies. The dynamic between Chuck and Whammer is very similar to Thorn and the Sidekick, but more exaggerated. While Chuck loses his cool more quickly and ends up louder, Whammer reacts to Chuck like he's reuniting with his best friend from high school and seems even more touchy-feely. I'm starting to see why people ship these two.
No, we're not partners!
Chuck doesn't though. The idea of Whammer trying to make Chuck a better criminal, infuriating Chuck in the process, also makes me laugh. Whammer suddenly becoming arrogant could have felt out of place, but I think they balanced it pretty well with his pre-existing personality. It's even better when you remember Whammer's previous involvement with the coach's villain school. I think a concept like this should have been saved for a villain who is more explicitly incompetent for the sake of irony though. While I may not be a fan of the deflating balloon of an ending, this episode definitely exceeded my expectations of the concept. Even the twist of the fake transport was pulled off well, it actually justified the nonsensical inclusion of the desert setting. I'm definitely looking forward to the next installment of this little Chuck Whammer storyline they've got going.
Ow! Medic!
One down and Whammer to go!
And the question is, who is the question?
Ms. Question, Big Left Hand Guy, and new character Invisible are attending their graduation ceremony from the coach's villain school, though Ms. Question ends up not actually graduating. Why is this?
You're missing the one thing every evil villain needs to take it to the next level.
And what's that?
A superpower.
I'm getting a bad feeling we're gonna transition into some superhuman bigotry plot eventually. Did someone remind Coach that Chuck, Tobey, Granny May, and Mr. Big exist? Ms. Question leaves, obviously upset. Hey, at least you actually stuck it out to the end as opposed to Timmy Timbo there, who apparently dropped out at some point. But then, a question mark shaped cloud appears above her.
Don't worry, kids. That's not dangerous lightning. It's just strong enough to cause superpowers.
Well, how very, very, very lucky for her then. Tonight at 5, parents of kids struck by lightning are blaming a PBS Kids show for supposedly teaching them that lightning will give them superpowers. A PBS representative's response? Seriously? You're blaming us? As a brand new spooky leitmotif kicks in, Ms. Question exhibits her new ability to basically hypnotize people into debilitating confusion as their heads become the dots of giant question marks, which may be my favorite visual gag in the show. She also gets a question mark shaped glider because at the Botsfords, TJ is doing a comedy routine with a joke book. Becky, apparently the only person to have heard these obvious jokes before, isn't impressed but soon picks up on Ms. Question at the grocery store.
How can you fire me from robbing you?
Good point. After examining the facts, I can tell you're a creative thinker. Congratulations, you're back on the team.
Hey, they actually made this joke funny. WordGirl moves to stop Ms. Question, but is hit by her new powers. Wait, is her nose a question mark too? Jesus, this one I wouldn't be surprised if her genitalia looked like that. Later, at TJ's treehouse, he's completed his transformation into a cliche Jerry Seinfeld knockoff. Becky overhears some audience members discussing a question mark shaped pin that used to belong to Socrates. She immediately heads off to interrupt the inevitable robbery and comes up with a new tactic to combat Ms. Question.
What time is it when an elephant sits on your fence?
What time is it when an elephant sits on a fence?
Come to think of it, would Ms. Question technically count as a Riddler counterpart? With a green goblin glider? WordGirl attacks while Ms. Question is distracted laughing, and victory comes when Huggy uses a symbol, which he used for rim shots because of course, to reflect Ms. Question's attack back at her. This makes her basically the same, except she can't walk on her own or something.
Is this poetic justice?
I don't know if they always planned on expanding Ms. Question or if they just liked how she turned out in season 1, but I love the big swerve they had her take. She goes from a random bit villain with a fun gimmick but no actual threat to someone with a powerful ability that's thematically fitting for both the character and the show. Unfortunately though, while Ms. Question's constant questioning gimmick still manages to be entertaining, I credit Grey DeLisle's delivery for carrying it, the episode outside of her antics feels a bit uneven. At best. TJ's whole comedy thing, even accounting for the idea we're supposed to agree with Becky that everyone is gassing him up too much, it feels a bit dull. The best moments are smaller bits like Bob pulling out a book on cats to get the answer to a cat joke, or Becky offhandedly mentioning that she's already read the joke book. I do like its payoff in the climax though, for how sudden and out of place in a good way it feels. Need I remind you, Huggy brings along a drum set that ends up landing the final blow? Also, honorable mention to the curator, who apparently sleeps on the floor and chastises WordGirl and Ms. Question for horseplay. This isn't technically Ms. Question's debut, but I like to treat it as such because of how different she's made by it. Not just the powers, but how she becomes a solo villain, mostly, after being grouped with the other students in her actual debut. And while I think the episode as a whole could be better, I think it does a really good job showing up how Ms. Question specifically can be both funny and threatening.
I'm Bo Handsome, and this is...
May I have a word?
Why does that one woman have her eyes closed all the time? Is she scared looking directly at the stage will burn them out? Actually, I can believe she thinks Bo Handsome could do that.
Well, I wear this net on my head. I'll scream.
Becky's school is gathered for an assembly. The principal chides Bob for swinging around.
That hairy kid should be on the Olympic team.
There is way too much about how people see Bob to unpack from that line. It's announced that the school's lunch lady is retiring after an 80-year career.
And most importantly, don't ask me what's in the fish sticks, believe me.
You don't want to know.
In fact, you might even say we just ate Ooter, and he's in our stomachs right now.
Sally then shows up to announce that Chuck is their new lunch lady as part of a rehabilitation program. I think I'm starting to feel deja vu of feeling deja vu by this point. Despite Becky's lack of faith in the concept of rehabilitation, Chuck takes to the job pretty well. We even see a montage of Chuck having a very unlucky day that fails to keep him down because of how much he loves his job. Then he quits and tries to destroy the school because he doesn't like hairnets.
This baby's on a timer, and I'm the only one who knows the secret password to shut it off.
I'm starting to get a headache from all this deja vu. WordGirl gets Chuck an actually comfortable hairnet, but Chuck has forgotten the password. He stays in the crusher to think, while WordGirl and Huggy retrace the steps through the day to find clues. Antics ensue.
Out of the way, Charles! Or should I say, Chuckleberry?
Chuck remembers he picked the worst password of all time and gets rewarded for saving the school from himself with a sweet new gig as a prison chef. I'll give him this, he has a pretty good sense for people's tastes. I like how Chuck by this point has pretty cleanly fallen into the niche of villain who tries to go good but keeps relapsing. Like before, he ends up quitting and lashing out due to some pretty petty complaints. This is probably the best example of his pettiness due to the hairnet thing being an actual health concern and how WordGirl is able to so easily find a comfortable hairnet that quells his wrath. As you could probably guess though, this does feel a little bit samey. It particularly has a lot in common with Chuck Makes a Buck, especially the montage of Chuck's new life in the middle. And of course, it also cribs a lot from You Can't Crush City Hall in the second half, to the point of reusing Chuck's password correct and password wrong sounds from there. Granted though, the approach of WordGirl and Huggy pursuing the password together across several different settings does breathe some life into the concept. I particularly like the bus scene, largely thanks to the driver.
Alright, you want an old-fashioned bus versus superhero drag race? Cause you got it. Here we go, baby!
But my favorite parts of the episode would probably be just how wholesome Chuck being so happy with his job is. The aforementioned montage is probably the best example, but even at the end, he seems just as content as a prison chef. I'd say overall, this episode is a less funny but more endearing version of Chuck Makes a Buck. The second half feeling way too similar to You Can't Crush City Hall doesn't help, particularly given how relatively early in the show we still are, but this is probably an episode you'd really like if you're a huge Chuck fan.
Allow me to introduce your new lunch lady.
I prefer lunch fellow.
Political correctness strikes again! Apparently 2 months passed over the last 3 episodes because now it's Christmas time. WordGirl defeats the energy monster by turning an ice sculpture into snowfall. Didn't think the electric types were weak to ice, but whatever. And we later see the Botsfords preparing for a Christmas party. A cheese-themed Christmas party.
And I got the Gouda!
Ah, Tim is secretly Marshall Erickson. I feel like this explains a lot.
We all would love it to snow for the holidays, but you can't force it to snow.
WordGirl literally just did. Meanwhile, Two Brains is enjoying the giant periscope the henchman bought for him. Actually, he bought it with their paychecks. Unionize already. And learns about the cheese-themed party because... what, did you expect Granny Maid to be the villain here or something? The Botsfords do a sing-along to help TJ stop being a curmudgeon as Two Brains modifies the periscope to teleport things to him. The cheese party, attended by the Heat Slips, the Mings, and Edith von Housinghouse for some reason, is remotely robbed. While WordGirl fights Two Brains, the party guests realize they don't need cheese to keep their holiday cheer, and then the cheese gets zapped back to them. WordGirl punishes Two Brains by forcing him to watch the partygoers eating the cheese, and he finally gives the henchman the gift they wanted all episode. We close out with another Christmas Carol and TJ's soul-crushing disappointment that it didn't end up snowing after all. Okay, first off, I completely forgot about the sing-along. It's not really the biggest deal, but the sing-along text honestly caught me off guard, and I like how you could tell Becky was a bit off-key even if no one pointed it out. I also like the second sing-along for the cameos, much like the trick-or-treat montage in the Halloween episode, though for some reason they only do Tobey and Chuck. Not having at least 3 makes it feel cut short, honestly. The Botsford cheese party thing as a whole isn't as good as the Two Brains side of the story, but it was pretty sweet, if cliched, to see them relearn the true meaning of Christmas after their cheese was stolen, even if I'd consider that a blessing. Hot take, cheese isn't good unless it's in pizza or Cheez-Its.
What did you say?
TJ ripping off Arthur's Perfect Christmas is fine. It's not that funny, but does play into the Christmas spirit angle, and I like how they don't just have him grumpy through the end. Two Brains shrugging off his henchman's desire for proper Christmas celebrations is both funny and sad, but has a sweet coda when it turns out he did get them gifts. And in between, we get their own Christmas party, featuring awkward small talk and some pretty good jokes during Two Brains' fight with WordGirl.
Now that I think of it, I will have some punch!
Although they don't have her do an actual punch here. Curse you, PBS Kids. This overall wasn't as good as the Halloween episode, but still did good enough at conveying the Christmas feel in that goofy WordGirl way. How many other shows would make a Christmas episode including the phrase priceless cheese diamond?
Since all the jails are closed for the holidays...
Are we sure Granny Mae doesn't have the mayor in her pocket again? Close jails to let guards spend time with their families for the holidays and totally not to make breaking out easier sounds like something she would have suggested. TJ has decided to take up another entertainer hobby, this time stage magic. Tim takes the kids to the bank where they're doing a loose change promotion. Deposit your coins and get a
WordGirl coin purse / keychain.
Some guy in a mustache shows up talking about a meat check and strikes up a conversation with Tim.
Oh, pardon me, sir, but your fake mustache appears to be slipping.
Don't be rude, Tim. When the mustache falls off, revealing this random guy to be the butcher, truly he is a master of disguise, he cuts in line to start his robbery. Becky and Bob are unable to change due to a lack of any concealment, and when the police show up, Butcher bars the door and forces all the customers into the bank vault.
Well, maybe the police can save the day.
Nope.
I'm the police sergeant, so I should probably do something. Problem is, I don't know what.
Yep. Becky agonizes over the possibility that she may need to reveal her secret identity to get out of the vault. And this is a pretty big deal, it's not just something she'd do out of nowhere, but TJ's magic tricks give her an alternate idea. Convince the butcher he just has to see the magic boy, which gets him to open the vault and provides an opening to transform. Thanks to TJ distracting Butcher again.
Now, you'll never be able to do that.
Oh yeah? Wanna bet?
Gentleman's bet. I don't believe in gambling.
Well, as Shadow the Hedgehog taught me, gambling is the ultimate evil, and we know these villains are nowhere near that level. WordGirl saves the day, and Tim gets to make a long line even more uncomfortable than he already was. This is another secret identity drama story, though not in the same way as the last couple times. Here, Becky is put in a situation where she may be forced to reveal herself for the greater good, and while it's not the most emotionally gripping thing, the episode does a good job selling her stress and desperation. Becky being trapped also gives an opportunity for some more in-depth jokes about the cops, lampshading how they're all kinda useless in this show.
This business has taught me that most villains aren't all bad.
Interesting theory, Deputy. But if it's true, does that mean we're not all good?
This really didn't age well, huh? TJ's magic hobby honestly is a bit repetitive, but I like how it ends up key to the climax. Watching the episode, I thought for sure they'd use TJ enrapturing the captives to distract them, so I was happy to see them go for the somewhat more creative and significantly more entertaining angle of luring the butcher into the vault. And this bit did give TJ some pretty good lines.
Mr. Coin, we have never met before, correct? Thank you.
This is also maybe one of the funnier episodes for the Butcher, from his bad disguise to him thinking nickels are made of wood. I wonder how many WordGirl characters would qualify as himbos. This may not be the most creative WordGirl episode, but the trapped in a vault thing gives a slightly different mood and approach to how WordGirl and the villain are handled. It almost makes me wish the episode spent more time trapped, but what we got was still good, and it helps that the stuff before was still entertaining in its own way.
That's right, because the coin is in Becky's ear!
I thought we already established she didn't have any.
But I saw you, Devon. You were hit by a meteor.
Hoo boy, here's one I've been waiting to dissect. Mr. Big is trying to steal a rocket ship, but WordGirl and Huggy show up to stop him.
Throw whatever you want at me, it's not going to change the fact that I am dominating you in this battle.
Then she gets hit by a meteor. Sitting in the crater next to it, she suddenly starts mispronouncing words and failing to fly, driving onlookers into despair and allowing Mr. Big and Leslie to get away. I mean, super strength or no, I can understand feeling woozy after being hit by a big hunk of space rock. Later, the news reveals that the meteor was made of pure Lexanite. Lexanite. Just going all in, are we? How long till we get a pink version that either makes Becky canon or turns WordGirl into Wordboy? Leslie explains the implications of all this to Mr. Big, who realizes Lexanite could get WordGirl out of the way while he enacts his plan of putting a mind control device on the moon. Surprised it took this long to get a space episode, honestly. At the Botsfords, an annoyed Becky argues with Tim and TJ about WordGirl's mistakes.
My flawless word knowledge is exactly what separates me from mere mortals.
Come on, we don't need another evil Superman parody. Becca's annoyance gets so bad, though, that she snaps and reveals to the two that she is WordGirl.
To be continued.
To prove she's telling the truth, she recounts her origin story. As a baby, she wandered onto Captain Huggyface's ship, and when Huggy realized she was there, he was distracted enough that he hit a meteor and was forced to crash on Earth. Soon after, the two were found in the woods and taken in by Tim and Sally.
Don't Don't you remember this part, Dad? You adopted me.
Rings a bell.
If you're so close to your daughter that you forgot she was adopted, that's probably a good sign. Oh wait, Tim's supposed to be the daft one. Tim and TJ don't believe Becky's story though, rendering all this pretty much pointless. We'll get back to that. Later, WordGirl is lured out by Mr. Big and learns about the Lexonite. She's pleased to know her mistakes weren't her fault, until the Lexonite gets clamped to her neck, allowing Mr. Big to trap her.
To be continued.
Yeah, this is the actual end of part 1.
We've had a long relationship, the two of us. I've enjoyed all of our little battles.
Part 2 starts with the narrator and exposition guy recapping part 1. Again, I have to wonder what the point is. And exposition guy gets locked in the Lexonite cage WordGirl's stuck in. Mr. Big reveals the cage is outfitted with a device that will only unlock if she can define the word potent. You know, on the one hand, I admire Mr. Big gunning for the irony, but on the other, does he really not see how this could go wrong? Later, this guy shows up.
Hey, Mr. Big, it's me, Handyman Todd.
Okay, I know this show reuses voice actors a lot, but this guy straight up just sounds exactly like Scoops. Wait a minute, both of their first names are Todd? That's it, this guy has to be Scoops from the future or something. Anyway, Todd gets locked in the cage so Mr. Big doesn't have to pay him before he flees to the moon with Leslie. WordGirl agonizes over her lost vocabulary, but exposition guy says you can always figure out what a word means through context clues. The 4 prisoners work together and figure out the definition of potent, freeing them all.
Strong and powerful. Yep, that's what potent means, all right.
Whoa, hold on. You had a dictionary this whole time?
Apparently time travel causes brain damage. We then catch up with Mr. Big and Leslie on the moon. You know, while I have some issues with this episode, one thing I will say is that I like the bigger scope. Going to space, talk of world domination at all, it makes the episode feel like a bigger deal, but in a way that feels appropriate.
Alright, it's time you knew. The secret mission is going to help me finally get back my casserole dish.
And then that happens. The mind control is activated, but WordGirl shows up to toss the device into the sun. Leslie finds the casserole dish on the rocket ship. Wait, how did it get there without them noticing when they've only had the rocket for like 2 days? Anyway, he immediately loses it to the vacuum of space thanks to Huggy. WordGirl dumps the rocket in the prison, where people are disappointed there aren't any aliens on board, and then heads home to do the dishes. Yeah, that was a subplot in part 2 for some reason. This may be the single episode I've most been looking forward to analyzing, and the bulk of that comes from some thoughts on the origin story bit that have been rattling around in my head for years. This bit is so messy and just comes out of nowhere to the point I question the very existence of this episode in this form. We'll talk more about the people think WordGirl screwed up angle in a bit, but that doesn't really connect cleanly to Becky recounting her origin. I'm honestly convinced that one or both, likely both, of the following scenarios is true. 1. The crew really wanted to share WordGirl's origin in the show itself and flesh it out beyond the single-sentence versions they previously gave us, so they shoved it in here. 2. They really wanted this episode to be a 2-parter, but struggled to fill that time, so they threw this in. And it doesn't even really amount to anything. I could forgive the clumsy way this was handled if they did something interesting with it, but the origin doesn't tell us anything important, isn't engaging in its own right, it's just more Superman homage, doesn't prompt any complex reactions from Tim and TJ, and doesn't have any consequences for the rest of the show, or even just part 2. You could cut the entire origin bit and lose nothing at all. The most I could say is that it has precisely one funny moment. The "you adopted me" part. While we're at it, the dishes subplot in part 2 was kinda nothing. It feels like they wanted to add stakes to WordGirl being trapped, but she was already dealing with the prospect of world domination, so did they just want something for Tim and Sally to do? Another thing I think the episode mishandled was the mistake bit. I get what they were going for, teaching kids it's okay to make mistakes, but this is undercut by the fact WordGirl's mispronunciations were caused by an external factor that literally hit her out of nowhere. It's like if a runner got a terrible time, but only because they had a fever. Maybe if the show wanted to do a moral about mistakes being okay, they should have let WordGirl actually screw something up, not necessarily vocabulary, but something. This does at least feed into the lesson about figuring out definitions through context clues, which I think is brilliant and maybe even overdue by this point. Even if the show was putting out new episodes to this day, it still wouldn't be anywhere near getting through all the words in a dictionary. This is telling kids how to use critical thinking to teach themselves things, which I think is a much more valuable and versatile skill in the long run than bluntly memorizing every featured word, though this memorization does still help vocabulary in its own way, of course. I honestly hope the show brings this concept that back periodically, not drawing as much attention to it as here, but maybe showing Violet or TJ or Scoops or anyone else taking a couple seconds to figure out a word while WordGirl isn't around. Hey, the show likes to occasionally do jokes about someone already knowing a word, and this could help with that. The figuring out the definition scene also shows off another part of the episode I love, Exposition Guy having a larger role. He's never been a main character, hence why he still doesn't have a name, but he's been a constant premise since the second short, so it's nice to give him more of a moment in the spotlight and show off more of his personality.
Anyone here hate small enclosed spaces or feel doomed? Doomed? Because I don't.
And him encouraging WordGirl and helping figure out what potent means is just sweet, though I think they should have downplayed his panicked voice a bit. I get it's part of his joke, but it doesn't gel with the tone here. Lastly, I touched upon the episode's larger stakes earlier, but I want to focus specifically on the escalation. It starts off with just some random robbery that isn't too much weirder than other crimes on the show. Then we learn Mr. Big has some secret master plan, and part 1 ends with the reveal it involves literal world domination. Part 2 builds it up more until he succeeds in mind controlling the planet, but also finds the perfect time to pull the rug out from under you with Mr. Big's actual goal and the reveal that all of it was completely unnecessary in the end. The episode's sense of pacing and timing with Mr. Big is really good. I'll be honest, there's some episodes of the series I struggle to write about because there's just not much to say. I end up taking breaks from writing to think and second guessing whether my script for that segment is too short. This episode though, I just breezed through. For the good and the bad, both of which it has in spades, it was very interesting to write about. If you want a good episode on its own, just stick to part 2. I guess that recap is good for something after all. Part 1 is funny at times, but pretty clumsy, and the origins part doesn't really matter unless you're the kind of person who needs to know the backstory for everything. Oh, and also, Huggy's slow motion moon gravity pounce is one of my favorite jokes on the show.
Slow projectiles are so deadly because then you can go in after it.
I'm gonna punch you in the face!
But it's opposite day.
While Becky is putting on an opposite day party for some friends of hers, Nocan's voyage home is interrupted when he accidentally destroys his own sail. Becky tries to sneak off to stop Nocan from stealing a sail from the museum, but accidentally forgetting her own do and say opposite things rule causes her guests to follow her around. The party follows Becky to the grocery store as per her excuse and causes some confusion.
We interrupt this shopping music for this important news story.
As a grocery store employee, I think I prefer random news stories on the intercom over the same playlist of songs over and over, especially during the Christmas season. The party then catches up with Nocan at the museum, and the other kids rope him into their shenanigans despite him actually easing up on his own contrarianism.
WordGirl, help me. These tiny peasants keep doing the opposite of whatever I ask them to do.
Apparently Nocan's so worked up over the sale he forgot about his main gimmick. WordGirl tells him to speak in opposites again to get the kids to leave him alone, then gives him a replacement sale. Apparently physics wasn't Nocan's best subject. I'm not surprised they did this concept early on. Tying Nocan to an opposite day thing is more obvious than putting a giant cheese wheel in a Two Brains episode, which they've done like 3 times by now. I didn't expect Nocan getting annoyed by a taste of his own medicine, but the irony was pretty funny and satisfying, and drives home how Nocan is a bit more than just guy who contradicts a lot. He actually falls into normal speech a bit more when something else is on his mind. The opposite day party itself could have ended up really dull and repetitive, but the sheer enthusiasm everyone puts into it works really well. It's not as good as Nocan's hamminess, but it makes this a very high energy episode that just barely doesn't outstay its welcome, and getting the grocery store manager involved was way better than I expected.
Am I on a hidden camera show or something?
You definitely are on a hidden camera.
Sorry about that, sir.
Scoops couldn't get the manager to play along, which makes him tonight's big loser. The only significant problem I had was the no exceptions thing. It felt pretty forced and was pretty blatantly a way to drag the party out until the confrontation with Nocan. All of that was entertaining, yes, but maybe they could have had the kids decide to go out on the town on their own, make it feel a bit more natural. This is a decently amusing episode. Not that it's the funniest or most unexpected, but it's good if you want to cheat laugh or you want to teach your kids about antonyms.
You are not invited to the worst party ever, Becky Botsford's opposite day extravaganza.
I guarantee there's like 5 more kids who didn't show up because they couldn't parse the invitation. Good job, Becky.
I'm a former agent and a grandmother. I know how to weaponize guilt.
At a meeting of the Evil Villain Association, Granny May is upset to learn the rules say she needs to retire due to her age, but soon discovers a corollary that she can stay active if she succeeds in capturing WordGirl. She's still happy to take her cool retirement skull watch though. Granny May later calls up WordGirl, playing up her grief over retirement to guilt her into visiting, then pretends to be starting a book club, with the first assigned book being one of the Princess Triana series. Wouldn't be surprised if Tobey told Granny about WordGirl liking that series. She eventually tricks WordGirl into opening the book, triggering a perfume trap that renders the heroes unconscious. WordGirl gets dropped back at EVA, and Granny May steals her retirement watch a second time before deciding to celebrate with a massive, dastardly, horrific spree of pickpocketing. Two Brains, Butcher, and Chuck fail miserably to keep WordGirl restrained, and she stops Granny May with the help of a sweaty guy. Chuck visits Granny in jail to get the watch back, but she scams it away yet again. I feel like they had to do this episode eventually. In general, the idea of a supervillain retirement is funny on its own, and of course they're going to use the one whose whole thing is being old. I'll admit, I think the forced retirement angle feels a bit, well, forced. It probably would have been better if this was a plot Granny May came up with entirely on her own, or even if she did want to retire initially but changed her mind later. But it does still work here, feeding into Granny May's plot to trick WordGirl. The whole sequence of WordGirl at Granny's house is really uncomfortable, but in a good way. Granny is emotionally manipulating WordGirl with guilt and the prospect of info dumping about her favorite book, and there's a sort of tension constantly building to the point Granny strikes. That said, this is another example of an episode that probably would have worked better if they opened in media res and left it ambiguous initially whether this was a trick or not. I haven't talked much about the Evil Villain Association up to now, but this is probably a good time to discuss them more in depth. As should be obvious, it's pretty amusing to see literal criminals get together like they're all just accountants or something, and provides a good vector to see villains team up or just interact in funny ways. Here we see Two Brains, Butcher, and Chuck handling Granny May's retirement, and it's neat to see them as supporting characters instead of just antagonists. The whole thing about the watch was funnier than I expected it to be too, from the mere fact of its existence to it having a jeweled skull design to Granny effortlessly stealing it back every time. It's a pretty good through line. The climax with Granny May pickpocketing the sweaty guy was kinda weird. As I implied, it feels a bit low-key. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't gel well with the tone of WordGirl being captured earlier on. It feels more like an epilogue than a climax, if that makes sense. I like the guy though, he got more characterization than I expected, and it was cool to see him help save the day. Honestly, I think I would have liked better if they leaned more on Granny May retiring, maybe use the book club concept somewhere else to give it its own time to breathe, but this episode was overall fine enough.
Thank you, WordGirl. So, what's the standard tip, 20%?
If a story says it's a realistic take on superheroes, but it doesn't have a scene of a citizen offering a tip, you are being scammed.
I'm a guardian of the earth!
New best episode title ever. Becky is ecstatic when a pretty princess toy she ordered finally shows up.
No, sir. Not another thought.
Okay, I'm just gonna start a list of all the people who know Becky's secret identity. I'll begin with Becky and Bob just for the sake of completion, then Expedition Guy, you can't convince me otherwise, Violet's cat, and now this delivery guy. Also add Tobey, Scoops, the Botford, Two Brains, and his henchmen for all figuring it out but either being convinced they're wrong or just forgetting. Wow, that's quite a list. Hope it doesn't just keep growing. Becky goes to work on her Earth Day project and asks Tim to recycle the absurd amount of packaging. But this is Tim, so it all gets thrown in the garbage instead, which gets Becky some dirty looks when she runs a booth on reusable bottles at the Earth Day fair the day after. Oh, I'm sorry, not the Earth Day fair.
Welcome, everyone, to the city's annual Clown Appreciation Day!
If anyone's in the market for more things to use as reactions on Twitter, here you are. But this becomes the least of Becky's worries when Eileen shows up, hearing Earth Day as birthday and causing a ruckus across the fair. Becky eventually succeeds in getting the fair's true purpose into Eileen's head, but this causes Eileen to want to wreck the Earth itself out of spite. WordGirl, however, tells Eileen that ruining the Earth means no place to celebrate her birthday, which convinces her to help undo her destruction in a montage.
We can go back to the fair! Pretty please. Only if you promise never to say pretty please again. Fine.
Character development!
You're my bestest friend ever!
Nice to see she's finally gotten over Violet. Eileen even helps out at Becky's booth, but still doesn't have her priorities in check. So yeah, this is a huge environmental moral. I'm not at all averse to that sort of thing, but of course it goes for the kid show depiction of environmentalism where the onus is put completely on regular people to not pollute. And yeah, abiding by the ancient proverb of reduce, reuse, recycle is a good thing and can make a bit of a difference in making your community nicer, but there's far bigger fish to fry when it comes to saving the planet. The generic and watered down approach to environmentalism isn't great, but I at least like how they tied it into the villain's motivations and gave her a reason to help at the end that didn't feel that out of character. Everything still revolves around Eileen and her birthday, but WordGirl is able to push that in a positive direction. The montage is a bit sappy, but it's fun and kinda heartwarming. The fair beforehand is also pretty funny. They use the Earth Day theme as a method to give some cameos to old bit characters like Tobey, as well as Baker and Candlestick Maker surprisingly enough, and it sets up for some pretty good gags, my favorite being the wind energy booth.
His hot air is powering this windmill.
Comes in black. Everyone looks thin in black.
This feels like a joke from The Simpsons. Also, are those watermelon batteries back there? Aperture Science has some competition. This is a pretty by-the-numbers plot, but as with a lot of episodes, the characters are what really make it worthwhile. Nothing here is excessively good, but it's fine enough as something you might watch on actual Earth Day or something.
It would be nice to have just one villain-free day.
Yeah, that would be really exciting to watch.
The narrator's one of those guys who constantly misuses the term filler, isn't he?
Are you kidding me? That isn't what happened. That is not what happened.
That's exactly what happened. What are you talking about?
No, it's not. That was bullshit. This is what really happened, okay? I was engineer, and you were scout, and you hit me with the ball during my magic show.
That's not what happened. That's not even close to what happened.
Fun fact, supposedly this episode's title is a reference to an X-rated movie. Edith von Husinghaus leads a police officer to the jewelry store.
Because you don't understand. You've never seen anything like this.
This is not at all unusual for the show, Edith. The officer asks what happened, and everyone shares their own versions of the story. Reginald paints himself as a suave, strong hero protecting his store from a ferocious Chuck and an incompetent WordGirl and Huggy.
And you, sir, are going to jail.
Oh my God!
Chuck claims to have been looking for money to feed a little puppy he found in the streets while depicting Reginald and WordGirl as, well, awful.
These rings aren't very valuable at all, but the public doesn't know that.
Well, at least this part feels true to life.
Listen, monkey guy, I think she could treat you a little nicer.
Gotta admit, there's something endearing about Chuck showing Huggy sympathetically, even if it's only to make WordGirl look worse. Oh, and speaking of Huggy, WordGirl's version shows Chuck robbing Reginald, but in a mellow way, and Reginald being cowardly. The narrator then chimes in to corroborate WordGirl's version of the story. He knows everything. Everyone eventually breaks free, only for all of them, including the cop, to get trapped again after another fight. Von Husinghaus leaves to get another officer, and more arguing over what happened ensues. Now here's a classic concept, utilizing what's called the Rashomon effect. Multiple different characters tell the same story, but give different details that make themselves look good. Show off different people's quirks, exhibit the stupidest behavior imaginable, and make a salient point about the psychology of eyewitness behavior, memory, and dishonesty. Reginald's is by far my favorite here. I mean, we already knew he was arrogant and snooty, but this is the first time we've really gotten a look in his head and goes beyond what you'd expect. His versions of Chuck, WordGirl, and Huggy have some connective tissue to the real ones, but are so hilariously out of character. I think I want Reginald to be an episode's sole main character by this point.
He wanted to take over the world.
I want to take over the world.
And that's got to be the most absurd part of any of these stories. I mean, really, Chuck ruling the world? Speaking of Chuck, his version isn't as entertaining, but it is entertaining. It's a bit slower and mellower, arguably fitting his personality, and where Reginald makes himself look intelligent and badass, Chuck paints himself as a sweet person beset by the real villains. Huggy's story, well, I definitely didn't expect his perspective to be that warped. And WordGirl's is just the real version? Admittedly, I find it disappointing we don't get to see how ridiculous it could get in her head, but it was still amusing to see Reginald get so worked up about his mustache and Chuck striking up a friendly conversation. And I think this is the first time the narrator has been vital to the story in a way that isn't just he spoils something for WordGirl, which is a neat touch and a good way to wrap things up. The real action scenes aren't that engaging, but they're the only actual weak link here. If you want some fun chaos, this is about as fun and chaotic as it can get for how limited the setting and scope are.
There I was, a brave police officer, facing off against the most dangerous criminal known to mankind.
Sad thing is, this guy is probably the most effective cop in the show.
What an accomplishment! Goodness, you should put this on your resume.
Is it just me, or are these title cards getting more boring over time? Huggy is finally getting some real respect, as a special ceremony is being held in honor of his sidekick work. And yet Becky is more occupied with her cartoons. I thought you learned your lesson, Becky. At the same time though, the Whammer has been released from prison, and taking after his favorite boss, is attempting to go clean and find a job. Yeah, this isn't gonna go well.
Stop the licking! Stop the licking! Wham session, yeah! And his coffee shop totally well!
Yeah, this isn't going well. A dejected Whammer sees the ceremony for Huggy and decides to gun for his job.
What font did you use? Is that
Garamondo!
Classy.
Yeah.
You know, they're right. Garamond is a nice font. WordGirl tries to let him down gently, but accidentally implies he'd get the job if Huggy was gone, and oh no, Whammer's gonna kill Huggy.
That is to say...
Oh no, Whammer killed Huggy. Whammer tries again to become WordGirl's sidekick, this time using the old job hunting tactic of throw a huge boulder at the city, but WordGirl just decides to admit she doesn't want him as a sidekick, and Whammer is subdued when Huggy crashes back down from space. Okay, I may have jumped the gun in season 1 when I complained about Whammer losing his designated sidekick theme, because this episode leans back into that. Whammer being pitted against Huggy is a really good idea, and I love the concept of Whammer trying to be a superhero sidekick. The concept. Am I the only one disappointed we didn't see Whammer tagging along for actual fights and bungling being a hero even worse than being a villain? Maybe get cameos from other villains who'd go, dude, what the f***? It wouldn't be that hard, just drop the other failed jobs and have him go from release to WordGirl immediately. Those parts are funny, but I think this change would have made the episode a better whole. I also think they could have done more with Huggy. This concept screams a personal duel between the two, but it just starts with Huggy getting whammed into space and ends with him crashing a playground rocker into Whammer. Some missed potential there. While a lot of the episode was undercooked, I like the little sub-moral it had with WordGirl learning that sometimes you have to be firm instead of nice. Whammer is accidentally led to think WordGirl wants him as a sidekick, and Huggy is just in the way, and she needs to be harsh but fair and turning him down for good at the end. It's always nice when a story, especially something for kids, talks more about the nuances of being nice. Unfortunately, that doesn't really save the episode. Whammer's failed jobs were entertaining, but the main conflict much less so. And if an episode starring the Whammer is boring, something has gone really, really wrong.
The Whammer doesn't know what to do next.
Okay, whoever's on that boat is actually dead. Congratulations, Whammer, you're the first WordGirl villain with a confirmed body count.
Well, like they say in Brooklyn, early to bed, early to catch the worm. Or is it the bagel?
WordGirl and Huggy are watching TV and happen upon a home makeover show for evil layers, which is the best reality TV concept I've ever heard. Ms. Question is also watching that show, thinking about refreshing her own lair, and she soon learns about the Ponderer, a statue so valuable it has its own dedicated guard who travels with it. And he makes a big deal about never asking questions, as if Ms. Question needed any more reasons to see him as an enemy. Later, the Botsfords plan their own museum trip.
Seeing all that artwork could give me ideas for my hideout. I mean spaceship. I mean room.
Becky, you literally told them you're WordGirl. There's not any point to covering it up anymore. Ms. Question arrives first and uses her powers on the poppy seed bagels Joe the guard likes, causing him and many others to be overwhelmed with doubt over everything.
How do I know for sure that you'll find these bagels as delicious as I do?
I don't think anyone should eat any of this guy's bagels. I don't trust what he might have done to them. WordGirl catches on and flies to Ms. Question's lair, which is actually really weird now that I'm looking closer, and beats her the exact same way as last time, just with a TV instead of a symbol. Okay, I got a big bone to pick with this episode, and you can probably guess why. The effect for Ms. Question hypnotizing people is way less cool now. I'll give him this, Ms. Question zapping some bagels is a bit more creative. This is basically the same sort of plan as last time, but at least Ms. Question causes a doubt pandemic, makes it stand out a bit both story-wise and humor-wise. It is kind of amusing to see a bunch of people entranced at once. Speaking of Ms. Question's victims though, Joe the guard was a bit of a disappointment. I didn't expect him to be that interesting or anything, but with the amount of focus he'd get, you'd think they'd do something funny with him. I get they needed a guard who likes to eat bagels for the seeds of doubt concept to make sense, but maybe they should give him more of a personality than the guy selling the bagels. I think my favorite part is Ms. Question's motivation. Stealing artifacts just for the sake of it isn't unusual for this show, but I love the angle of her literally just wanting to use it as decor. And like I said, it's neat to see her bizarre lair, even if I'm not entirely sure what any of this has to do with questions. Is the layout supposed to make you ask questions? Okay, never mind, this is brilliant. Actually, come to think of it, what if this episode involved Ms. Question stealing a bunch of things to spruce up her lair and using her evil bagels each time, lean into the home decor theme even more and show off more bizarre artifacts? That probably would have been more fun. Honestly, this is another episode that's carried by the personality of the villain. Ms. Question, largely down to her voice acting honestly, is still a delight to watch despite a lot of the episode being pretty repetitive and underwhelming. At least I can admire the show coming up with good featured words. Doubt is great to tie to Ms. Question, and refresh works well for the decor element. The show is really good at coming up with vocabulary that doesn't feel forced.
What if I said to you that the ponderer belongs to me?
And apparently Ms. Question is now forklift certified. WordGirl is doomed.
You may have hoodwinked everyone else in this backwater town, but you can't fool me. I listen to public radio.
It's TJ's birthday, and he's excited about buying a WordGirl home kit with the money he got.
It's got a helmet, and a cape, and a power pack.
Billy, you okay? Not really. Find the power pack.
Found it. On the way, though, TJ happens upon Seymour Orlando Smooth during a live show to promote his new program, where he grants people's wishes after being given money. Okay, Seymour must be the most charismatic person alive if he convinced the network to give him another show. Even one of the higher-ups is his uncle or something. TJ gets taken in by the spectacle and hands over his birthday money for the home kit and an actual jet. Honestly, I could believe TJ getting a jet for an episode, but gets upset when Becky helps him realize he was hoodwinked. In a pretty sweet moment, Becky shows her protective side and resolves to go get justice for her little brother, but her attempt to apprehend Seymour doesn't go well.
Oh, and that chain is fool's gold.
Seymour Orlando Smooth. Pettiest man alive. Seymour's scam wishes escalate.
And you got your $10.
No, but I got this certificate that says it's worth $10. What a country!
Until the mayor decides this is a quicker and more efficient way to get a new swimming pool. WordGirl chases Seymour as he tries to skip town, but he beats her again, only for TJ to show up with apparently the last dollar in the city, distracting him long enough for WordGirl to get free and cuff Seymour. Honestly, the more TJ episodes we get, the more I start to appreciate him. We don't get to see some massive character development here, but we get to see him gain retribution on Cosmo Orlando Smooth by directly helping WordGirl in her crime fighting for the first time. It doesn't hurt that they seemingly dropped the TJ has a crush on WordGirl thing in favor of just being a huge fan, or that we get to see Becky being a protective big sister. The show concept, well, what do you think? It's neither funny nor believable, probably the most basic possible way to get a lot of money in Seymour's hands. I think the big problem is sticking to Seymour specifically being a game show host. If this was depicted more like a reality show, with Seymour showing up at people's houses in a montage or something, it would have felt at least more unique. There's not even many worthwhile jokes to Wishful Thinking. Sure, there's some. I particularly like Seymour failing to hide his disdain for WordGirl, but it's mostly just people giving him money and him being smarmy. There are a few more good bits outside of the show, like the Fool's Gold gag, but the episode overall isn't as comedic as you'd expect. If you really like TJ, this is probably the episode for you. If you're looking forward to seeing more of Seymour Orlando Smooth, you'll probably be disappointed. I will admit though, there is a clever touch in Sally being a bit more visibly apprehensive about Seymour, obviously a result of her already being scanned by him. What nice character consistency that they'll obviously keep moving forward.
Looks like I just blew her out of the water.
As a great admirer of beauty, I absolutely love mornings.
Mornings are the opposite of beautiful, but okay.
I bet I'll forget the cream cheese.
Oh, and this time I'll remember the cream cheese.
I'm starting to think Dave is psychic. Beatrice, back at the copy shop, decides to steal the Royal Dandy painting and replace it with a fake out of anger at Dave calling the original superior to a copy. Another group preparing to see the painting is Becky's art class, with Violet being particularly enthused about Royal Dandy. That night, Lady Redundant Woman uses her duplicates as a ladder to break into the museum.
At least I'm not being greedy and keeping the painting all for myself.
Yes, you're a moral paragon, woman trying to steal a valuable painting. She succeeds in copying the painting, but the boy in the copy comes to life. LDR grapples with the 1-2 punch of Royal Dandy acting like her bratty son, and the copy painting obviously not having him in it anymore.
Maybe no one will notice.
The next morning, Violet notices.
Someone replaced it with a paper copy.
Hey Rarity, can we borrow your fainting couch? Meanwhile, Royal Dandy is out and about, as the narrator says, causing total mayhem.
Well, maybe not mayhem, but he's definitely annoying people.
He eventually returns to Beatrice to demand she make him some mates, and WordGirl shows up in the middle of their argument. We get another don't be a doormat lesson, though this time with the weird twist of the 5th grader teaching the adult to stay firm with her son. Royal Dandy lashes out by blasting paint. This is the least weird part of the episode, and Beatrice undoes him after he coats her copier. I think we're all better off if we don't ask any questions about this. Oh, and don't worry about the theft, Beatrice. Dave is totally gonna give you a 5th chance. There's something really charming about a villain's goal ultimately being really petty, especially when it's relevant to their character. Like, say, a character themed around copying, stealing a painting to prove a copy of it is just as good. This is the concept that could have worked well enough on its own, like a better version of Seeds of Doubt. But then the painting comes to life. Royal Dandy is one of those characters who's so entertaining specifically because they're really annoying. Seeing him stomping around, taking whatever he wants while a snooty yet goofy Victorian nobility style song plays is just a hoot. Him acting like Lady Redundant Woman's kid was also pretty good. It's pretty basic, just him calling her mum and acting spoiled towards her, but it shows off her easily annoyed nature in a different way. Though it does make the climax a bit weird when you interpret it as Beatrice literally killing her kid.
Why didn't you just do that earlier?
Oh, it's hard to let go of any of my dupes, okay?
Right.
What?
Bye-bye. Punish! I just needed you to make a ladder.
I also love Violet's depiction here. This is probably the most enthusiastic we've seen her, and it works well in contrast. It's like the reverse of lighthearted stories have more punch when they briefly go dark and serious. A part of me wishes she was involved in the climax, and I do think it would have been amazing to see her interact with Royal Dandy, but I don't think it's a huge missed opportunity like previous episodes have gone over. They wanted to tell a story about a hilariously annoying painting boy coming to life, and they sure did do that.
Not done looking.
Dave, don't be greedy.
At long last, Dave finally has a fault.
I'd love to give you that. On your car!
Another Seymour episode? That was quick. Sally is obsessed with Seymour's newest show. I was giving you credit for seeming hesitant last time, Sally, but now you're back to square one. We couldn't give Tim a Seymour episode? It'd mean we have a clean sweep of the Botsfords. Anyway, the show involves contestants answering questions to win new cars, and the returning champions have won more than 80 times in a row. No points for guessing what the twist is. We go behind the scenes to learn the champions are in league with Seymour and are also his brothers. Okay, that part I didn't see coming. Sally then gets invited onto the show and has to choose her partner.
I think we can win. Your father's really smart.
Yeah, Becky gets picked instead. On the show, the two are asked what the height of the Eiffel Tower is. Since they're given 1 minute to answer, Becky is allowed to walk off and think, Seymour presumably assuming there's no way she'd be able to get it in that time. So what does Becky do?
Here we are in Paris.
Because what else would she do? Becky pops back with the answer just in time. Seymour tries to save things by asking the champions an alternate question, 1 + 1. The two are so incompetent though that they can't get the answer and let slip about Seymour's plan.
If you were giving them the answers before the show, that's cheating.
And flying to Paris in the middle of the show for a bizarre and illicit phone-a-friend isn't cheating? The brothers all try and escape in the car of the day, Becky transforms in front of the studio audience, and WordGirl just drops the car in jail.
That's right, jail, where you'll spend your days and nights making license plates, eating disgusting food.
Good job on the unorthodox scare him straight bit, I guess, but seeing Chuck not as a prison chef just feels sad now. Okay, as much as I liked the premise of Seymour and still have some fun with his personality, his episodes are already starting to get a bit stale. Aside from WordGirl flying to Paris and the introduction of Seymour's brothers, who I have a sneaking suspicion will never be relevant again, what does this episode really accomplish? Well, maybe that's a bit harsh. It is at least a bit funnier than Wishful Thinking with the behavior of the brothers and Sally, the latter of whom is somehow even more exaggeratedly enthusiastic than the last time. Admittedly, I still stand by preferring Tim being in this position, both because he hasn't gotten a Seymour episode and because this yelling makes more sense for him, but still. Oh, and there's also this bit.
I'm talking that way too, because... You know what? It helps if you keep them short, Mom. Oh, okay.
Why do they always talk like that in these situations anyway?
My eyes!
I like when villains get dumped in jail alongside whatever stuff they were using at the time too, it makes it even sillier. And we get a rare villain definition, nice to see them adding a little variety.
We all know this show is completely legitimate. That means it follows the rules and gives each contestant a fair chance at winning.
But really, I still think Seymour is being held back by being pigeonholed into game shows. Making him a more general TV personality would help a lot, like a more glamorous version of Mr. Big.
I give you the answers before the show, you keep winning the game, and we get to keep these shiny new cars for ourselves.
Question. What exactly is being achieved here? You still need to own the cars to give away in the first place, so what's the point of setting up the scam when you still have to pay for them? Were they stolen and this is some ridiculous way of laundering? Does Seymour make that much money off the show itself? Does the city have some kind of tax break for game shows? Actually, never mind, the city probably has that, makes perfect sense. After WordGirl and Huggy apprehend Ms. Question again, she's put on trial with Sally as prosecutor. Ms. Question uses her power, though, to hit Sally with doubt and disrupt her case.
Ms. Question, you are free to go on the grounds that we're all too befuddled to find you guilty of any crime.
I know I could be talking about the horrible legal system in this city, but can I mention how Ms. Question needs to zap Sally 3 times within 20 seconds to keep her befuddled? This woman has a very strong mind, it seems. Dejected over her failure, Sally quits her job and becomes a stay-at-home mom, but her desire for justice keeps manifesting in family trials that annoy everyone. Meanwhile, Sally was apparently the only prosecutor in the city, as now there's no one left who can convict Ms. Question and keep her in jail. Actually, I'm just now realizing that between Sally and Becky, the Botsford family has a lot of pull in the city's legal system. There's an idea for your WordGirl goes evil fix. Becky gets Sally to the bank at the same time as Ms. Question is robbing it, then jobs as WordGirl to get Sally to step in and do the same thing that WordGirl did the last 2 times she beat her. I like Ms. Question and all, but they really need more creative ways to defeat her. Her confidence back, Sally returns to work, giving relief to the victims of Ms. Question's crimes and Sally's suffocated family. Okay, this is a much better Sally episode. Still involves everyone acting grossly incompetent, but it's a more engaging conflict. This is basically the wrong side of the law, but with Sally as a protagonist instead of an antagonist. Her insecurities over losing the case, well, they feel a bit extreme, but at least we understand where they come from. Her overly dramatic lawyer speak coming through at home recontextualizes her from intimidating to hilarious, and does a good job showing that she is a filthy, mucky liar when talking about how she's fine staying at home all day. And of course, her stepping up to fight Ms. Question in the end is cool and satisfying. It's like TJ in Wishful Thinking, but even better because she actually fights. Sort of. And this all adds up to a Ms. Question episode that actually has a different feel. Sure, she's doing the same thing in the broad strokes, but confusing people into letting her go feels more unique than confusing people into letting her steal things, at least. I think the focus on a side character instead of Ms. Question herself really helps the episode go a different path. Sally is really becoming one of my favorite characters by this point. She's more capable of downplaying humor when the situation calls for it than other characters, but this seriousness can still be twisted into comedy when that's not the case. I much prefer her here as opposed to being a slightly less dumb version of Tim like last episode. Although with all the courtroom scenes the series has given us thus far, I have to wonder, are we ever going to see one of the villains actually get a lawyer? Imagine WordGirl having its own Saul Goodman figure, that'd be incredible.
Eureka! This piece of evidence is a rope!
The trouble with elevating a running gag like this episode does is the potential for ruining it with overexposure, over-explaining, or just putting it in a scenario it doesn't fit. The 2017 DuckTales had a joke about Scrooge hating Santa Claus for some unexplained reason, but then in the final season it was explained, and the explanation didn't live up to the comedic absurdity implied by leaving it unspoken. Amazing Rope Guy thus far has been only a bit player, his entire point being how pathetic and easy to beat he is, which sounds like the exact sort of thing that could easily be ruined by making him the main villain of an episode. So does the episode ruin him? Let's find out. After a brief recap of Rope Guy's shtick, we see him in prison and learn he actually has a gift for impressions.
I have a monkey named Captain Honeypaste or something.
I mean, they're okay, I guess. He then has the idea to use his impression of the warden to trick the guard into letting him go.
Maybe being an imposter can help me commit other crimes.
Hold on, I need to check something.
Today's featured words are imposter and untangle.
Uh-oh. Amazing Rope Guy then uses his skills to impersonate the Butcher and later Chuck to get away with his crimes. Becky, who's struggling to figure out a special knot, ends up arresting the two despite their protests that they're not guilty. this time. We then get a montage that oddly cuts off at only 2 impersonations. Between this and Oh Holiday Cheese's cameos, did the writers forget the rule of 3 exists? Before Becky puts 2 and 2 together. Amazing Rope Guy's latest robbery gets disrupted when he meets...
I love Tobey, he's such a good villain.
Someone who should probably be on a watch list, and ends up venting about not getting the credit he deserves before WordGirl shows up. He actually succeeds in hitting Huggy, but his elation just gives an opening for WordGirl to Pegasus, not him. Well, I hate to admit it, but this episode actually pulled off Amazing Rope Guy as a villain without sacrificing what made him funny. The big thing is that he's only able to successfully pull off crimes by literally pretending to be someone else, which preserves his pathetic aspects because it's so far removed from his usual MO, and he doesn't get credit for it. This is something he's painfully aware of, to the point his anger boils over and causes him to sabotage himself. And even when he puts up a bit of a fight at the end, he still goes down much more quickly than other villains, and even has his own main weapon used against him. It also helps that his impersonations are really funny. They're close enough to the real villains that you can see them as impressions, but also diverge at the right times for comedic effect or just making WordGirl suspicious. It's not just the quality of the voices either, but what Rope Guy actually says. He'll remember to get words wrong like Butcher, but then...
Nah, just give me some cash. I don't really like sandwiches.
I'm getting flashbacks to that weird pencil guy. How do you dislike sandwiches as a concept? This plot point also allows some funny moments of WordGirl meeting Butcher and Chuck on their off days, which is probably the most the show has emphasized its the villains are regular guys who treat their crimes like a normal day job conceit.
I guess we have to battle, but I just want to go on record as saying that I do not feel good about it, since I really didn't do any crime.
And of course, WordGirl awkwardly apologizing to them after getting them released at the end. You feel bad for them, but then you realize you're feeling bad for the dangerous criminals, and you laugh. Color me impressed with this one. I was genuinely worried this episode would fall flat, but it did interesting stuff with its villain, and it was one of the funniest episodes of the season. If you ignore how Becky's super hearing seems to have shut down, this episode has practically nothing wrong with it. It even has a cat playing skee-ball. What's not to love?
Hello, I am not Loretta Sanchez Johnson.
Then this is just a waste of my time. Becky's doing the news with her friends because she won an essay contest, and the top story is about a giant grilled cheese sandwich. Give me a moment, guys. I want to try and figure out who the villain will be before they appear. Also, keep in mind Scoop's being described as an investigative reporter. It'll be kind of a thing eventually. Chuck shows up to steal the giant sandwich, forcing Becky to leave the newscast, but he gives up because his machine can't grab the thing, so Becky gets back early.
What's happening, Scoops?
So if I join the grocery store club...
Apparently Scoops does better with writing than live performance. I can relate. Then Two Brain shows up, and things go about the same as with Chuck.
If we hurry, we can catch Antiques Roadshow.
You can watch the walls of your bedroom. You're grounded.
Okay.
And Two Brains is still their dad. Becky tries to salvage her newscast, but soon gets hijacked again by Chuck and Two Brains now working together. Okay, real talk. I joked about the villains here being obvious, but I was embarrassingly still surprised by this team-up happening.
You know what they say, half a grilled cheese is better than no grilled cheese at all.
Nobody says that. You're the only they who's ever said that.
I prefer lunch fellow.
WordGirl and Huggy's plan to free the sandwich ends up blasting the villains away, Huggy gets to eat some of it, and Becky gets back in time to close out the news. One question though, where exactly did the villains land? Oh. They didn't. This may be the most unique feeling episode in the season thanks to the whole Becky does the news thing, and it's pulled off fantastically. I love how they start in media res, immediately kicking off the broadcast and explaining how he got here in just one sentence. This provides more time for goofy news hijinks like a random girl mugging for the camera, Bob hating the fact he has to exist right now, and Violet.
And here's what I think. Trees are beautiful.
The villain showing up only to easily give up is also pretty funny. It reminds me of WordGirl letting the Butcher go if he returned the tokens back in Where's Huggy. It subverts your expectations in a good way while still standing up for the final battle, and it keeps these confrontations short enough that we have even more time for news jokes.
Welcome back to the city's most serious news program.
Serious! But the villains still have enough time to do more than just be utter failures, both apart and when they get to play off each other, though admittedly the episode's plot prevents them from taking full advantage of the team-up. The episode is just packed with jokes the whole way through. This has maybe been one of the funniest episodes of the series thus far. This episode doesn't really have a finale feel, but it's entertaining enough that I think it's a great way to cap off season 2. The unique premise and surprise team-up help. Always gotta end on a high note.
So, if my mom's meatloaf is delicious...
Hey, Meatloaf, give me a hand here. It's very heavy.
Okay, I know that isn't this guy's actual name, but it's still better than Red Hat, so I'm just gonna call him that from now on. 1 year in, and we're through some shorts and 2 seasons. 2 seasons are all twice as long as the remaining 6, incidentally. My favorite episode pair of season 2 is, no surprise, What a Tangled Knot You Tie and Kids Action News. Neither really has any deep themes or anything, but both have some of the strongest humor of the season and take some risk with story or characters that really pay off. My least favorite pair... This was tough, but probably Wham Up and Seeds of Doubt. Neither are that bad, but both are pretty disappointing. Both episodes have really strong premises, Whammer trying to replace Huggy, and Ms. Question using food to hypnotize a ton of people, but both spend too much time on setup to really take advantage of them or do anything else unique. I think this season had more dull episodes than the first, but also more standout episodes. Sometimes it felt like a slog, sometimes I plowed through writing about an episode. I think at this point my only wish is that the show does enough new and or big things that it doesn't get boring to cover, whether that's for good reasons or for bad reasons. But in the end, we can all agree on one thing.
This isn't interesting.
Hey, wait, that's not right. Nocan, I need some help here. Next time on...
WordGirl! Don't you see he's robbing you blind? Totally worth it!
I need change for the snack machine.
The bat signal!
All the bread is mine!
No such thing as too pink, okay?
What job would you not like to
The
try?
guy who has to clean up this goop.
Victoria, you ate 20 crackers.
Featured word. What's the featured word?
I must defend your honor, WordGirl, by challenging Scoops to a duel. I'm scared of public speaking.
But you speak into a microphone every time you're on this show.
Oh my goodness.